Good evening, and thank you for attending today's special called meeting. This has been a tremendously busy time for all of us at the county, including our participation in this year's legislative session. One of the most pressing matters that has arisen is cityhood, with the possibility of incorporation of 4 new cities. While discussion of 2 of the proposed cities occurred prior to 2021, the feasibility studies of 3 of the 4 studies were not completed until November and December of last year. Feasibility studies provide what services each of the cities will include. At the top of this year, the county began conversation with a consultant to provide impact analyses of new cityhood formation in the county. Unfortunately, the consultant is not able to complete analyses by the May primary, when the referenda for the cities is planned as a result of activity this legislative session. This timeline is expedited from contemplation of cityhood referenda in the general November election. Consequently, I have asked for staff to complete financial impact analyses for the county internally. This not only helps us understand the potential operational fiscal impact to the county, but also enables us to respond to the myriad of questions we have received from the public. Please know that while cityhood impacts all citizens of the county, citizens in the incorporated areas cannot be passive regarding this matter, as your participation in the vote will determine if a city does or does not form. Considering that election turnout is particularly low in May primaries, your participation is extremely important. I am of the thought that an educated voter and citizen tends to be our most engaged and informed. Thus, I thank you for being engaged tonight, as our staff helps to inform you on this matter. Please note this is a virtual meeting with only me on the Board of Commissioners and staff present. Other commissioners are watching virtually, and I thank them for their participation. I thank you two for your participation and for tuning in tonight. Of note, this meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing beyond today. With that, I'm going to turn things over to our county manager, Dr. Jackie McMorris.
Thank you, Chairwoman Cupid, the Board of Commissioners, for the opportunity for us to take a look at the feasibility studies and to address some of the questions that our staff and our employees have been asked. Again, we're here not to take a stand for or against any particular city. As noted by the chairwoman, the consultant that we had reached out to was unable to provide a feasibility impact study. So therefore, I would like to thank my team, my directors, for putting a lot of work into what you will hear and see tonight. So overall, we will look at each of the cities. We will look at what is proposed in those cities, the impact of those proposals, some assumptions, and some of the questions that remain unanswered. So to kick it off, we will look at an overall impact of the feasibility study. For that, I will ask our CFO, Bill Volkman, to come and share the fiscal impact of the proposed citihoods. Bill?
Thank you, Dr. McMorris. If I can interject, as I've received correspondence that we may not be able to be heard. Are there any sound issues that have come to anybody else's attention? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. At this time, I will ask the CFO, Bill Volkman, to come and speak. Bill?
Thank you, Dr. McMorris. Chairwoman, Commissioners, we just wanted to go over a brief overview of the financial impacts. So with that, I just wanted to share with you the data that is going to be shown here tonight is derives directly from the cityhood feasibility studies, and I'll share with you specifically on the revenue side of that. That's coming directly from the feasibility studies. And then we worked closely with our department and agencies to provide the expenditure impacts as well. So with that, I wanted to show you the proposed services for each of the 4 cities. So just kind of want to walk through those real quickly. All 4 cities are going to include planning, zoning. Just City of Lost Mountain and Mableton are proposed for sanitation. All 4 will include Parks and Rec, a limited municipal court to deal with code enforcement fines. And then the City of East Cobb is proposing additional public safety services for police, fire, and 911. So with those services come proposed revenues. The City of East Cobb is the only city that is currently proposing a property tax, and this is more of a property tax shift. So they're proposing to shift the current fire millage rate that is paid to the county for fire services to the city to go into the city's general fund to pay for their overall costs. All 4 cities are looking to provide or propose alcohol beverage tax. This is a little unique to the county since we do collect it, but we give 50% of our collections to the Board of Education and 50% to the Galleria. So this would have no impact, but all 4 cities are proposing a alcoholic beverage tax. All 4 are proposing insurance premium tax as well as TABTs. Just the cities of Mableton and Vinings have hotels located in their proposed city limits, so they're proposing a hotel motel tax. The City of East Cobb would, associated with their millage, would include intangible taxes as well as real estate transfer tax. All 4 cities are proposing a business license and building permits. The City of Lost Mountain and Mableton are proposing park and rec fees. All 4 cities are proposing the municipal courts, again, to deal with their code enforcement fines. There's miscellaneous revenue, and then the franchise fees. This is a little unique. All 4 cities are proposed franchise fees, but currently the county only charges cable franchise fees to the people located in the city limits. So the cities are proposing additional franchise fees for both electric, natural gas, and telephone. This would be an increased cost to the citizen as those costs would be transferred onto the citizen and residents. And then again, City of East Cobb is proposing 911 service, and with that comes a fee as well. And then we have a small fee for the state DOT LMIG funds with the City of East Cobb. So I shared with you the proposed revenues that they've listed, but I want to share with you the impact on those revenues would have on the county. So I'm just going to go down in order here. The City of East Cobb, the revenues that they propose would have an $8.2 million impact on the county's general fund, a $14.1 million impact on the fire district fund, a $1.2 million impact on the 911 fund, for a total overall impact of $23.5 million. City of Lost Mountain would be all general fund impacts, so that's a $9 million impact overall. City of Mableton would be $9.8 million impact in the general fund, and again, they have hotel motels located within their proposed city limits, so it's roughly about a $1 million impact to the hotel motel fund for an overall impact of $10.8 million. City of Vinings would be a $1.5 million impact to the general fund, and then an $800,000 impact to the hotel motel fund for an overall impact of $2.3 million. So just going across to the far right, you'll see that the overall impacts, if all 4 cities are formed, the general fund will lose $28.5 million of revenue. The fire fund will lose $14.1, 911, $1.2 million, and the hotel motel fund would lose $1.8 million for an overall loss of revenue of $45.7 million. Now with that, to acquire the property, specifically parks and public safety, each of the cities would have a one-time site acquisition that would be paid into the county. So you have those numbers across the bottom. City of East Cobb would be $42,000, Lost Mountain would be just over $70,000, City of Mableton would be $53,000, City of Vinings would be $138 for a total of $166,000. Okay, so with that, we did work very closely with our departments and identify the departments that would be most heavily impacted by the proposed services. Community development would have no impact to their existing 2022 budgets. We will go through on an additional slide any future impacts for the 2023 requested budgets, but keep in mind, these are the budgets that are currently funded today. Parks and Rec would have the most extensive impact. If all 4 cities were created, it'd be about a $3 million reduction in their expenditures. And the fire fund would have a $126,000 reduction to their expenditures, and that's for the maintenance of Fire Station 15 and 21. The hotel motel fund, we did talk about the lost revenue, but again, we send 62.5% of that over to the Galleria Authority. This would be the reduction that the Galleria Authority, that portion of those collections that would have gone to the Galleria Authority. So the total expenditure reduction is $4.3 million if all 4 cities were formed. So I want to go through the net impact because I think this is really the bottom line that we want to get to here. The overall net impact for the city of East Cobb would be a $23.1 million loss to the county. And you can see the breakdown by fund. General fund would be 7.9, fire district roughly 14 million, E911 1.2 for a $23.1 million reduction. City of Lost Mountain would be 8.5 million. City of Mableton would be $8 million reduction, 7.6 of that being within the general fund and 374,000 being in the hotel motel fund. City of Vinings would be $1.5 million reduction to the general fund and an additional 300,000 to the hotel motel fund. So to get the overall impact, if all 4 cities were created, the general fund would have a net loss or negative impact of $25.5 million, and that is roughly the equivalent of 0.7 mils under the current digest. The fire fund would be roughly 14 million, and that is currently 0.38 mils, but keep in mind that number would be higher as you would exclude the city of East Cobb, who is currently part of that digest. So it would be a higher number as we move forward. And the hotel motel funds that we have here, this is the 674,000 that you see on the far right. This is the 32.5% that the county does receive, and we use that to pay for the debt service on the Performing Arts Center bonds as well as the stadium bonds. So the overall net impact to the county is a $41.4 million reduction. Okay, so we did mention this because we did have a limited impact on existing budgets. This would have an impact on 23 budgetary requests. So the general fund, the police would remove 13 officers, operating costs and capital for a reduction in their request of $1.4 million. Parks would remove 29 positions, including operating costs and capital, for a total of $5.2 million. The fire district fund would remove 24 firefighters, a firefighter 2s, a fire inspector 2, fire inspector 1 with vehicles for a savings of $2.6 million. Now again, these are unfunded as of today because they are not approved yet. E911 would remove 5 EOC2s, operator manager, and a budget analyst for $566,000. And again, the bottom bullet point is just a reminder that we use the 37.5% that the county receives for the hotel motel. That lost revenue would be that we use that to pay the debt service on both of the Performing Arts Center bonds and the stadium bonds. Okay, so moving into the outstanding questions that we have related to finance, how will the county be compensated for providing fire services to the city of East Cobb from October 1, 2022, which is the beginning of our fiscal year 2023, to the date that the city begins to provide service? They're proposing most of their revenues will come in the form of a millage, which will not be collected until the following October 2023. So that's an outstanding question, is how would we handle that? Additionally, will the county be compensated for the equipment located at the fire stations as well as the parks? How much will the new cities increase the county's future House Bill 49 annual payments? And how much will the new cities impact the future SPLOST allocations? And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Brantley, our Parks Director.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening, Chairwoman, Commissioners. Talk about just a brief overview of the parks and the effect that it might have on the parks from a total county standpoint. First map's a little tough, but it actually shows all 4 of the cities, and it shows all of the parks inside of those cities, and we'll go into more detail a little bit into those as we move forward. This just gives you a little bit of an idea. Looking at the legend at the top, you've got, active parks, passive parks, all your different centers, playgrounds and trails, all of your baseball and softball and football and soccer, lacrosse fields. All of that is listed, and it gives you an idea of what you're looking at per city. But at the bottom, if you look, if all 4 citihoods were to pass, you're looking at about 29 total parks and about 1,451.71 acres that it would affect. And again, we'll get into more details on the breakdown per cities as we talk about each city. Some of the current park staff inside of those cityhood boundaries, this is affecting about 25 full-time staff members and a score more of the part-timers and seasonal. With our full-time staff members, we're currently about 31 full-time staff members down right now as we stand. So we would hope that the staff could be retained and moved around to other parts of the county that are struggling with a shortage right now. Same thing with our part-timers. We're pretty far down in our part-timers. I think we're today a little over 80 part-timers down. It is starting to affect operations, and the closer we get to spring, of course, it'll be even worse. Our part-timers are a little bit tricky because a lot of our part-timers, they like to hang out and work inside of that community that they're at. They don't want to travel across the county. So if they're inside of a certain area, a lot of times they don't want to go to another area to work part-time for a few hours a day. So we would expect that a lot of our part-time staff would probably be lost in these. So that's just one of the things that we were looking at. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to our Community Development Director, Jessica Gwynn.
Thank you, Michael. Jessica Gwynn, Cobb County Community Development Director. And Cobb County Community Development includes a number of different divisions. We include economic development, planning and zoning, code enforcement, permitting and inspections, erosion control, and also business license. So there's a number of services that we provide, and each of the 4 proposed cities are proposing to provide community development services. Community development is a little bit different from parks and also from the emergency, the public safety agencies, in that we don't have the same considerations for capital facilities. The service delivery is not quite as complex as it is for some of those other agencies. As you'll see here, I've provided some statistics, some of the numbers of what we've covered here in the last couple years in community development. As you can see, in 2021, we had a little over 28,000 code enforcement inspections countywide. We issued 893 commercial permits last year. Erosion control inspections were up over 20,000. Multifamily, 284. Residential and commercial inspections, we've seen a lot of activity there. Currently in 2021, we're at 82,000. And then, of course, we've seen a lot of residential permits, single-family residential permitting activity countywide. Some of the things that we provide in community development, our staff is about 125 employees, and since we do have a larger organization, we're better able to allocate our resources, whether they're inspectors or code enforcement officers, to the areas where they're most needed. As you'll see, and I'll show later on as we get into the more specific city proposals, some areas of the county do require additional code enforcement or they have heavier permitting and inspection activity. So we're able to shift our resources to provide those services in a way that a smaller agency may not be able to. Another thing that we offer here in Cobb County is for the erosion control group. We are a local issuing authority, so that means that we're able to review our own erosion, sediment, and pollution control plans rather than sending those to the state for review. That's something you typically wouldn't have in a smaller agency. It takes some time and also some considerable staff resources and education to obtain that certification. So that's something that we're very proud to be able to offer here. And then finally, our agency also works very closely with our cities on the House Bill 489 service delivery strategy agreements, looking at how service delivery is provided across the county with the county and the cities to ensure that there's no overlap in jurisdiction and also to ensure that all the services are covered. So of course, if we had new cities come on board, we would simply have new agreements with those cities as well. And then we work closely with our cities on annexations countywide. At this point, we'll turn it over to Dr. McMorris.
Thank you, Jessica. One of the things that has been left out of a lot of the studies is the assumptions that we have about our senior centers and our libraries. So we just wanted to show a slide of the libraries that would be impacted, as well as the senior centers. So for the city of East Cobb, it would be East Cobb Library. City of Lost Mountain would be West Cobb Library, Kemp Memorial Library, West Cobb Senior Center. In the city of Mapleton, it would be the South Cobb Library. In the city of Vinings would be Vinings Library. Again, these are just some of the things that were not really clarified in this study, and we would welcome the opportunity to speak with any of the proponents of these citihoods. In addition, I just want to go ahead and say right now that there's a lot more information that is out there on our website, so we encourage everyone to go out to our website, which is cobbcounty.org/cityhood. At this time, I will turn it over to the Director of Public, the Director of Public Safety, the Director of Public Safety, Randy Kreider, who's going to start with the City of East Cobb. Randy?
Thank you, Dr. McMorris. I am Randy Kreider. I am the Director of Public Safety here in Cobb County, and you're going to be hearing from 3 of our departments within public safety. You'll be hearing about from police, fire, and 911. And before I get started, I just want to say that we, as the county manager and others who have spoke before me, we're not here to advocate, but we're here to educate. I am a full believer that before anyone casts a vote, they need all the details of what it is that they're voting on, and they need to clearly understand the impact that something like this has on the citizens who will be receiving the services. And I will tell you that over the past couple of months, I've been asked a lot of questions that I don't have answers for, and that's been my response to many of these people who have asked a variety of questions. And so my goal is to bring to light some of those things that I don't have answers for, and also make some comments about the current service levels that our residents in this footprint of East Cobb are currently receiving versus what they may receive in the future. And for public safety, we will only be talking about the City of East Cobb because the cities of Vinings, Mableton, and Lost Mountain are going to keep the current public safety services that they have right now. They don't have a desire to change their police, fire, or 911 services. So some of the questions that have been asked of me that I could not answer is what's going to happen to our future service levels. And I've got a few of those broken out underneath the first bullet being the department structure. On 2 different occasions, I've read in newspapers where the proponents of the City of East Cobb have referred to their future services as better services, and I'll talk a little bit about that in our last bullet. But in the feasibility study, obviously a lot of the services that were mentioned were just general. But we have some questions because another reason we need these answers is because we would need to know what's expected of our fire department in Cobb, our police department in Cobb, and our 911 center in Cobb should East Cobb incorporate. And so I think it's important that we understand that to know what's going to be expected of us. And so going back to some of the services that were not mentioned in the feasibility study is our specialty teams, both in police and police and fire, and those respective chiefs will address that when they give their presentation. The next bullet is mutual aid agreements, and certainly we have mutual aid agreements with all of our contiguous jurisdictions when it comes to public safety, and City of East Cobb would be no different. But I will say to you that both the residents in the new city and the residents of unincorporated Cobb will be expecting to receive those services that they pay for. And I know our elected officials will, and of the city and of the county, and I also know the citizens within those footprints will want to be serviced by those that they pay taxes to. And so that would be part of that mutual aid agreement. And oftentimes those mutual aid agreements are based somewhat on the services that the agencies can provide. And that's another question that we have is what services are they going to provide and what services are they not going to provide. And then the last thing I will bring up is that currently in Cobb County, all 3 of our agencies, police, fire, and 911 are accredited agencies and have been accredited for quite some time. And then also our fire department is an ISO rating of 1, which is the best rating a fire department can have. So I just wanted to make that comment because I just feel like all of the residents within this proposed city deserve the best services that they can get, and that concerns me moving forward because there are a lot of questions that I don't have answers to. So with that, the first department head I'll bring up is our Fire Chief, Bill Johnson.
Hey, good evening, Chairwoman and Commissioners and County Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. And just to add to a little bit of what the Director just said, you know, for the fire department, we are an accredited agency and we are ISO 1 rated. And according to the CPSE website, over 27,000 fire departments in the United States, there's only 113 fire departments nationwide that have both of those ratings. So we're very proud of that. So I'll jump right in to what I'm going to talk about. And, you know, in the feasibility study, it's said that the fire department, the services they're going to provide are administration, suppression, prevention, logistics, and training. So we do have some questions of what that looks like. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I will hit a few of them. And the first thing I'd like to point out is what we have on the screen is it's really two maps overlaid on each other. So you'll see the colored portion of the map. The colored portion of the blue and kind of beige, if you will, I'll call that, that is the current proposed city of East Cobb as it stands today, the latest map we have. The blue that you see for us in Cobb County currently, that's the territory that our Station 15 and our Station 21 currently cover. The red line in the middle, delineating between 15 and 21, that is our territory line that we use a software system to tells us where that line should be. So we have kept that there. So Station 15 and 21 blue is what we currently have. The beige, if you will, the EC1 where the cursor is now, EC2 and EC3, those areas are in the new proposed city limits, but they currently are being serviced by a different station other than the two stations that will go into the new incorporated city of East Cobb. So basically, and I'll talk about it more, what we're saying there is those citizens, to get a fire response to their area, now will have to have the Station 15 or 21 respond there, which they'll see an increased response time. But I also need to point out at the very top northeastern corner, the CC1, that area, we currently respond there with our engine 15. The city of East Cobb has not included that area, so our Station 14 will have to travel further. So those citizens will be in unincorporated Cobb still, and they'll see a longer response time. So that's the map right there. So moving on for fire, the city of East Cobb, some of the questions. The first one is, how is the city of East Cobb Fire Department going to be structured? I know the director talked about that, but our questions are, how many and what type of apparatus are you planning on staffing in the city of East Cobb? Also, what is your minimum staffing levels? We know we have a minimum staffing level of 3 on our engines and aerial apparatus, but we're curious what they will do with that. The next bullet is the city of East Cobb going to be a full-time paid department like we currently are? Cobb County, Marietta, Smyrna, and Austell, we're full-time paid fire departments. There is a fire department in the local metro Atlanta area that uses part-time firefighters to staff their apparatus. So basically, they're full-time firefighters in other jurisdictions, and on their days off, they work at this fire department. There's rumors that the city of East Cobb may be looking at that. They're unanswered questions, so we would like to know what that looks like. For Cobb Fire, our effective response force for a fire, and this is a Cobb County term, a moderate fire risk, and for us, that's just a single family residential structure. At minimum, we're going to send, at minimum, from the initial dispatch, 13 people. Typically, it's more than that, but that is our minimum number that we're going to send. And our question is, how will the city of East Cobb Fire meet or exceed that minimum with only 2 stations? And I can tell you, when we send a response to a structure fire, and in this instance a residential, we're typically going to send response units from 3, 4, or even more fire stations. And then the director also talked about the specialty units. And so some of the ones that we have that we're asking questions about, what is the plan for those units? You know, we have advanced life support units in Cobb County throughout the entire county. And basically what that means is we have the ability to do everything that an ambulance can do, but we just don't transport. But we can do what those ambulances can do prior to the arrival of the ambulance if we need to. Our hazmat response, we have 2 hazmat teams. And you know, what is the city going to do on those hazardous material incident calls? We have 2 comprehensive technical rescue teams. And they do things such as vehicle extrication, swift water rescue, high-angle rope rescue, trench collapse rescue. What is the response plan for the city of East Cobb for these type of incidents? Medical operations response. We work closely with our partners in Cobb County Police and Sheriff's Office with SWAT call-outs, high-risk warrants, hostage situations, and others. So those are some of the structured questions that we have. As far as mutual aid, I know the director talked about it as well, but what type of mutual aid agreement, if any, is the city of East Cobb planning on having with Cobb County? And if we have, the key there is that word mutual, meaning going both ways. And if we're going to have a mutual aid agreement, are the citizens and our city council for the city of East Cobb, are they going to be comfortable with a fire apparatus from their organization leaving the city to go into unincorporated Cobb? Should we ask for them? Because that's going to leave a large portion of the city open for a response area. And then the last one is, how does the city of East Cobb plan to backfill fire stations when they have a significant incident? We talked about that, moderate fire risk response. If they have a fire in the city of East Cobb, it's going to wipe them completely out. What process are they going to use to make sure that the citizens still have fire coverage during a mass or a major incident? So we have those questions. In my last slide that I'll go over is about the training, because that was one of the services they're going to provide. And the director said, and I said, we are an ISO 1, and that's a portion of the ISO rating. And so what that means is, for the training aspect, it says, hey, for your training facility, you have to have a live fire training structure, which includes a smoke room, a drill tower that's at least 3 stories, and a training area that's at least 2 acres. And is the city of East Cobb prepared to provide such a facility? And you'll hear Chief Van Hooser talk about this in a minute, but for Cobb, we feel like that we provide a superior training level for our firefighters when we bring them on. We do all of our own in-house training. The state standard is 8 weeks, somewhere in the neighborhood of 345 hours. Our training just on the fire side, not including EMS, just the fire side for our recruits, is 12 weeks and 480 hours. And so we take great pride in that. And so we also may hear people talk about, well, ISO, I'm really not concerned with that. And really all the ISO is a measure, it's a national standard to measure risk. How prepared is a community when it comes to fire? And if you have an ISO rating of 1, you are the most prepared that you can be. And so obviously we have proven that that's where we are. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the police department and Chief Van Hooser.
Good evening, Chairwoman Cupid and Commissioners, County Manager. Thank you. My name is Stuart Van Hooser. I am a Deputy Chief with the Cobb County Police Department, and I'm the current Acting Chief. I'll start off with a little bit of an opening statement, kind of on the heels of what Chief Johnson just talked about. I've been here for 32 years, and I have a lot of pride in this county. I'm very proud of what we have been able to do as a police department and how we've been funded and supported by this county, and I'm very proud of the work and the skill level that our officers and detectives and our civilians have provided to this county. And I guess our overarching concern is to make sure that people understand how great we are as a county and as a police department, and understand the services that we provide to the current residents that are considering this, and to go over a few of those and just ask some questions about how those services will be provided in the future. So first of all, the City of East Cobb feasibility study, they are the only of the 4 cities that do plan to have police services. And the feasibility study is somewhat generic and vague on what exactly they plan to do, but obviously uniform patrol and traffic. They do state that they will have criminal investigations, which prompts a few of the questions we'll talk about here today. The traffic also prompts a few questions as well. They'll have administration and jails as well. Assumptions that you'll find in the feasibility study, they think that they will use approximately 71 officers, and they believe that the cost estimate will be $7.3 million a year. The police facility is not specifically identified, but one could draw from the study that potentially they're possibly looking at using Precinct 4, which is where our current officers are housed. So, to go into a little bit about the special teams, which Director Kreider referred to and Chief Johnson talked about. In the police department, we have some specialty units that are extremely important. They're well respected, and in fact, they have some of the best numbers in the state, if not the best numbers in the state. Crimes against children, extremely specialized training, not only in what they investigate, but how they handle internally, stress-wise, what they investigate. The number one child rescue unit in the state of Georgia, several years running, awarded by the GBI. Our K-9 unit, which does some extremely dangerous work, not only with potential bombs, but also with searching for armed suspects at night in wooded areas and so forth. Our homicide unit, one of the highest clearance rates, probably the highest clearance rate in Metro Atlanta, I would almost certainly, year after year. Extreme dedication and extreme specialized training there. SWAT goes without saying, the kind of work that they do. Very dangerous and again, highly specialized. Several hostage rescues in the past few years. Training, and this one's big, we'll talk a little bit about this one. We have our own training unit, thanks to the support of this county, thanks to the support of our taxpayers, giving us a new training center through the SPLOST. We are now regionally known as a magnet for training. But what's really important about this is that our current officers from the Cobb County Police Department right now, they receive 27 weeks of training. We do all of our in-house training, just like Chief Johnson stated with fire. The state only requires 11 weeks. So we over double that. And we're very proud of that, and you can actually see what we do every week on our website. We have a bomb unit. We have a traffic fatality unit, which is extremely specialized training. Very busy unit. We have a gang unit. We have a crisis negotiation unit. All those together, really, they are the reason, along with our patrol officers, along with the sheriff's office, our DA, solicitor's office, all of our law enforcement partners, that Cobb County is as safe as it is. And you can look regionally, and I think everybody understands that Cobb County is an extremely safe place to live, especially in urban metro area. Second, in addition to our special teams and what we offer, we have some, I'll say, equipment technology programs that are second to none. And a lot of those have been recently funded by this board and is greatly appreciated. The first two are really kind of community-faced. The first one's LPR, which stands for License Plate Recognition. The second one is RTCC, which stands for Real-Time Crime Center. Both of those we partnered with local Atlanta companies that are fairly young, and we partnered with our community on those. They help us make this area safer. The LPR program, we have measurable differences there. It is substantial crime drops in some of our most troubled areas. Real-Time Crime Center is a relatively new program, but we have already solved several crimes that really before the center was even stood up completely, including one fatality hit and run that just occurred a few weeks ago in partnership with DOT, in partnership with 911 and other departments in the county. So those two programs have been extremely impactful, and it makes you ask, are these programs going to be able to be sustained inside the city? Those last three, I'm not going to go into them in great detail, but I can tell you what they do is they help us link violent crime. They help us discover the identity of violent and property crime offenders, and they help us reconstruct in 3 dimensions crime scenes for presentation in court. Altogether, those programs help us be a safer county, basically. So taken together, the special teams and the special equipment and technology that we have, it's just a service level that is beyond what most average police departments, especially smaller ones, can offer. These questions are what we have to ask as a police department, and they really kind of are driven by the things I just talked about, so this will be fairly brief. But first, very important to us, does the City of East Cobb Police Department plan to use Precinct 4 as their home? And can we work that out? If so, of course, that impacts us because we've got to figure out where to put our precinct 4 officers. Second, how and where will the City of East Cobb Police Department officers train? Will they train in a regional academy where they get the 11 weeks? Will there be some need for any assistance with training their officers from Cobb County Police Department? And will they be able to train to the standard that they currently have? Next, what services will city residents need beyond the capabilities of the City of East Cobb Police Department? That goes back to our special units, Crimes Against Children's units, homicide, SWAT, all the special units that we have. Next is, what will the structure of the City of East Cobb Police Department be? What units will they have? They say criminal investigations, but we're not really sure what that means. Will they have some of the specialized units we have, or will they just have like a property crimes unit? What will their command structure look like? What will their span of control over their officers look like? Will that be a close enough span of control so that they have proper oversight? What is their beat design going to be currently? They're taking 3.5 beats of our precinct 4, which has 10 beats, which leaves us 6.5 beats. So to understand what their beat design helps us to understand how to ensure that that level of service remains similar to what it is now. And finally, what equipment and technology needs would the city residents have beyond what City of East Cobb Police Department would be capable of providing, those technology programs and so forth that we talked about just a few minutes ago. So in essence, that wraps up our questions for the City of East Cobb, and I believe we will turn it over now to Melissa Alterio from 911.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Chairwoman. Commissioners, thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. I forgot I'm short, and so I got to adjust the microphone there. I am Melissa Alterio. I am the director of the Cobb County E911 Center. The portion of the feasibility study for the City of East Cobb surrounding 911 was very vague. It was it was just a short section, and it stated there that they intend to manage their own emergency calls, and they referenced the approximate $1.2 million in revenue based upon the population, and also compared use the comparison of the city of Brookhaven and city of Dunwoody, and I just wanted to reference that they don't currently have their own 911 center. They are contracted through a private entity. So some assumptions that we have determined is, does the city of East Cobb plan to launch their own 911 center? And what that involves, and if so, what is the facility that's been identified? So a couple of questions and concerns that we have is, what would the time frame be? Who manages emergency calls in the interim? Are they dispatching for all police safety services, all public safety services, or will they take police dispatching and leave fire to Cobb 911? So that is something that we do for one of the cities in Cobb County now. In addition, for the city of Marietta, for instance, we dispatch for all police and fire agencies, and it all comes from one entity, one localized 911 center, and so we have like a seamless transfer of service when it comes to emergency dispatch, and which reduces response times, of course. So something else that was of concern to us is what radio system will they be using? That was not mentioned anywhere in the feasibility study. And again, I do want to just take a second to echo what Director Kreider had said. This is simply for education purposes only. Cobb County manages the largest radio system in the state. We have over 11,000 users and 6 counties on our radio system. So what would that look like for the city of East Cobb if they choose to be on our Cobb County radio system? To promote interoperability between the public safety entities in the immediate area, we would look at approximately a $275 cost per radio on an annual basis. And just for perspective, each fire apparatus houses approximately 5 radios. If they're creating their own radio system, there are infrastructure costs that are involved that are not accounted for, FCC licensing and so forth, and then there does become a safety issue with interoperability with regards to the different agencies. So another very large concern, and again, just for education purposes, that we have is cell phone misrouting. When someone calls 911 from a cell phone, the public may or may not know this already because I'm sure they have experienced it at some point. The call is sometimes delivered to the wrong emergency communication center. These misroutes are not necessarily due to a technical error. They can occur because the 911 system is configured to route calls based upon the location of the cell tower. And according to the FCC, approximately 80% of 911 calls that are received today in 2022 are from wireless calls. About 12% of that 80% are misrouted. Misrouting of wireless calls impacts emergency response. They occur more frequently near 911 center boundaries and in areas where multiple jurisdictions are in close proximity to one another. Now, don't get me wrong, transfers can occur, but depending on the type of technology and infrastructure that is in place, if we were to transfer a call, for instance, to the city of East Cobb, we may be able to only transfer the voice portion and not the data portion that comes with it, the valuable data information. They may not be able to receive that technology at all. For instance, a text to 911 transfer call may not be able to go through if they do not have the capability to receive a text to 911 call. Again, from an FCC feasibility study regarding wireless calls, approximately 40 seconds is wasted on average transferring between 911 or dispatch centers. Another question that we had is with regards to training. What type of training will their dispatchers have or emergency telecommunicators have? Before we go into the current service of Cobb 911, I'll just state that the state of Georgia has a 40-hour basic telecommunicator course. Cobb County 911 has a very robust training program, and we exceed that 40 hours by quite a bit. We have a 6-week academic training program, and then in addition to that, we have an additional 8 to 10 months of on-the-job training before we consider an 911 professional to be fully released to work independently on their own on all positions. As Director Kreider said, we are a nationally accredited 911 center. We are one of 7 in the state to receive this accreditation. That's 7 out of 153 911 centers. We are getting ready to one of our goals in 2022 is to apply to be an accredited center of excellence on an international level through the International Academy of Emergency Dispatch. And I again will state that Cobb 911 provides a high level of service to our citizens by utilizing protocols housed through the International Academy of Emergency Dispatch. That's Emergency Medical Dispatch Protocol, Emergency Fire Dispatch Protocol, and Emergency Police Dispatch Protocol. The only other agency in the state of Georgia to utilize all 3 protocols is the city of Alpharetta. So we are quite proud of that service. That service includes providing pre-arrival medical instructions on medical calls. That includes CPR, childbirth instructions. We've delivered quite a few babies over the phone, as you well know, Chairwoman. The Heimlich maneuver. We provide instructions in an active shooter incident for the safety of those who are faced in that type of critical incident. We call that the 0-minute response because as we are taking the information, we entering into our computer system, another dispatcher dispatches the call, and we are continuing to provide that caller with instructions to treat the patient or to preserve evidence at the scene or relevant safety information to keep our caller safe. We do have specific location accuracy technology that we have in place, far greater than any other 911 center. I can say that in the metro area, we are very innovative when it comes to technology. We are prepared with up-to-date 911 systems to partner with the state and also the regional Metro Atlanta agencies to launch next generation 911 implementation. We do have text to 911 in place. And I say this again from an very respectful educational standpoint, simply because it's a common misconception, not just in the county, in the state, in the country, that 911 services are the same everywhere, and unfortunately they are not. So you can go, and I'll just use another state, for example. You can go to the state of Virginia, nothing against Virginia, but you may not get a 911 center in that state to provide emergency medical dispatch instructions. You may drive 20 miles down the road outside of Cobb County, and you may not receive the same type of 911 services that you do receive in Cobb County. So we are quite proud of that. We do, as Chief Van Hooser said, that we partner with Cobb PD. We monitor flock cameras We have a lot of integration of technology in our center that lends to their real-time crime center, so we're super proud of that. And of course, we have our certification to the Georgia Crime and National Crime Information Centers as well. And so my knowledge at this point, I am told that the Georgia Emergency Communications Authority has had no information with regards to launching their own 911 center. So there are some concerns there specifically to make sure that we are still providing the citizens of the city of East Cobb and the entire Cobb County with the best possible emergency service and emergency response that they can receive. And we know that when people call 911, they are in a crisis. And it is our job to lead them out of that crisis. And so that's why we had some concerns from this study. And that's all I have. So I will turn it back over to the Parks Director, Michael Brantley. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Going back to the city of East Cobb, talk a little bit about the parks themselves. And the page, if you can sort of see it, my coloring is not quite as good as it was in second grade, but we have the navy blue at the top, and then you've got sort of a purple and a red at the bottom. So going down, East Cobb, Fuller's, Hyde Farm, Mount Bethel, Felton, and the Wright Environmental Center, along with the Worthing property, were actually listed in the study. But the Worthing property is actually outside of the boundaries of the city of East Cobb. Columns Drive is actually now in the city of East Cobb after the second iteration of the map that we just received from reapportionment actually put Columns Drive inside of the city limits. And then the Shepherd property is a property right across the street from East Cobb. It could have been an oversight with the transpose of the Worthing and the Shepherd property. Just don't know that. But when you look at it, East Cobb, they originally had, I think it was somewhere around 28 acres. Actually, East Cobb, as you can tell right there, is actually 50.01 acres. Same thing at the Felton property. They originally had about 4.1 acres, and it is actually about 18 acres. So if you were to take Worthing out and then add the two at the bottom that were not listed in the study showed about 170.99 acres. It actually would be a little bit closer to 233.42 acres per the city boundaries as they are. I won't go through every one, but we'll look. Just you can see this is a little bit better map that we had of the original, where it was blown up and showed the entire county. But that just sort of gives you the idea of where the properties are. As you can tell, right across the street from East Cobb is the Shepherd, and then sort of on the outside the Worthing or Worthington property. Further over by Sewell Mill. So again, that could have been an oversight, not really understanding that one. So that just gives you an idea of the map. Again, not going to go through every one of the amenities in each one of these, but this just gives you an idea of some of the amenities. Now, while we would not be losing these amenities, and while the residents would not lose the amenities, it was just amenities that the county would not be managing anymore, and so that was one of the things that we wanted to show. We also talked when we were putting this together, there's a lot of, as you can imagine, emotional investment in a lot of our properties. A lot of our staff have been taking care of and maintaining and programming those properties for a long time. So there's always a little bit of emotional investment that our employees have talked about. You start talking about something like an East Cobb Park, Fuller's, and a Hyde Farm, Wright Environmental. All of these properties are sort of gems in that area, and that's just something that we take pride in. Again, moving down and just looking at the other three, the Worthing, of course, not inside of the boundaries, and then you've got Columns Drive and Shepherd that are inside of the boundaries. So that's just again a question of what is that going to look like. Going back to the feasibility study in and of itself. When you go back to the East Cobb feasibility study, the Parks and Recreation is listed in the appendix, and it actually states that at that time it would not be a service that they would be providing, but we know that they actually have talked about it and they will be providing that service. But the way it was put into the appendix, it was very vague, so there is a lot of questions as to how the department would run based upon what it is now. Will maintenance be privatized, or will it be an in-city force? Startup costs are not mentioned in the study, and we're starting to, as we're putting together some of our lists for all of the cities right now, we're starting to see a lot of costs that I think people aren't necessarily grasping, because we weren't grasping them either until we started looking at them. So I think there's a lot of those costs. Hyde Farm for us, of course, is historical significance. How will this property be maintained and programmed moving forward? Again, back to the properties listed versus the actual and the boundaries. The revenue shared down by all of the parks facilities. So one of the things that they talked about in the feasibility study is sharing down the revenues based upon the average across all of Cobb County. Well, it's kind of hard to do that. We really show Fuller's Park as our only park that actually makes revenue in that area. So that's sort of one thing as to how are they looking at that. One question that we keep getting asked over and over again is about the Tripp property. The Tripp property, we've already purchased one part of it, and there's a second piece to the Tripp property that was put into the SPLOST 2022 under then Commissioner Ott's, special pile for the $8 million per district. So in going back and looking at the purchase agreement from the first Tripp property purchase, it shows in the purchase agreement that we'll have the first right of refusal. But it also shows that the minimum that would be paid for that property is $8 million. If that property is to appraise at $9 or $10 million, is the city of East Cobb going to be able to put that money up to purchase that piece of property? Again, just questions that we just don't know about, and the questions that we've been asked. But I think once you, again, going back to the feasibility study, I believe it's the lack of the details. It's just hard to kind of get a clear picture of what it's going to look like, and I think those are just questions from our standard. And if East Cobb and all of the other cities do pass, I'm a recreator at heart. I want the residents to have the best quality of service that they can. We, of course, always state that we give the best quality of service. But if the city of East Cobb thinks that they can give a better quality of service and their residents agree, then all for it, and we hope them the best of luck. So with that, I will turn it over to Jessica Gwynn with Community Development.
Thank you, Michael. So the City of East Cobb is proposing to provide community development services within the city. The study is not very clear on exactly how many staff members that would include. It does reference a number of comparative cities that have an average of about 13 community development employees. So I'm assuming that that's the assumption that they're basing their study on. As you can see here, the City of East Cobb, as it's proposed, is about 7.5% of the total land area of the county. Interestingly, this area is actually not one that we see a lot of code complaints. Only about 4.5% of the total code enforcement inspections countywide are in the area that would be the City of East Cobb. So we currently have about 1.5 code enforcement officer assigned to that area. So it's actually 2 officers that are assigned between this area as well as Vinings and other areas in East Cobb. This is one of our heavier areas for residential and commercial inspections. Roughly 10% of residential and commercial inspections in 2021 were conducted in the area that would be included in East Cobb. And again, it's an area with a heavy residential permitting trend there. We do have a handful of zonings that have taken place recently in that area, and I will say that in the City of East Cobb, that area, that we do enjoy a good relationship with the East Cobb Civic Association. We have a number of community groups throughout the county that are very active and involved in the zoning process and serve as a voice for those area residents in the zoning process before the Planning Commission as well as the Board of Commissioners. So they're very active, and of course there's representation on the Planning Commission as well as the Board of Zoning Appeals for that area for District 2 on the Planning Commission. With that, I believe we're back to Michael.
Thank you, Jessica. Chairwoman, Commissioners, I think you're going to see a little bit of back and forth between me and Jessica for the rest of the night, so just sort of get used to that. Talking about the city of Lost Mountain, sort of the same thing that we did before, and talk about the parks. So you've got Lost Mountain, Oregon, Green Meadows Preserve, Leone Hall Price Park, Schmidt Family Park, and Kemp Family Park. It's about 706.12 acres inside of the study area, and again, you can see it right there. There are actually 2 parks that are inside the study area that were listed inside of the study. One is Pittner Road Park and one is Allatoona Creek Park. Both of those are leased through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers by Cobb County. It was stated inside of the study that they would assume that the county would continue to operate those two parks. So again, we did not leave it inside of the study. And don't really talk about it here, but there's a property, Loving Good property, which is sort of right to the east side of Lost Mountain, right there next to Schmidt Park, and that's actually a county park property that was also not listed inside of the study. Again, just going back and not going to go through all of these. Sort of talk about what they are. Lost Mountain, one of our probably largest regional parks inside of Cobb County. You've got the recreation center and the tennis center and multiple ball fields and fishing ponds and playgrounds and everything else. Just a very large regional park. Of course, Oregon Park, another active park with plenty of opportunities, baseball and disc golf and everything else. Just sort of that connection between that and Green Meadows, and Green Meadows is a very, very popular park for us, and it also includes the Bullard House, which was just renovated a couple of years ago. And then again, you've got the Leone Hall Price Park, which just purchased the other part of that park in the 2008 Parks Bond, and we actually now, you're going to have a little bit more of a developed passive area on the south side and a little bit more of an undeveloped passive area on the north side of Stylesboro. And then you've got, of course, Schmidt Family Park and Kemp Family Park, both undeveloped properties that we also purchased in the 2008 Park Bond. Again, just going back to some of the questions and assumptions from Lost Mountain, and there are a lot more when you start really drilling down, but it's one of those things that we tried to only ask certain ones or give you a sort of a snapshot of some of the questions. But of course, assuming the study and reading, it seems like maintenance would be outsourced to a private firm, and will a private firm coordinate all functions needed? And one of the things that we're starting to see it a little bit more, and I think every new city in the state of Georgia that seems to have come on, I think a lot of them have tried that, the contracting and or privatizing. I know of 2 cities right now in the metro area that are actually going away from the privatization of the maintenance and operation of the Parks Department and going back to an in-house function. That's just one of the sort of the questions that we've got. There was also a statement in the early part of the feasibility study on revenue and taxation about double taxation if the city is providing the same service as the county. And, one of the questions we have was, does that necessarily mean that the city residents would only use the city parks? Because if the city residents were to use the county parks, they would not necessarily be double taxed. Because that's just one of those things that, county residents, we let all city residents and all Cobb County residents and use all of our parks, and we don't necessarily separate the two. So that's just one of the questions we had. Again, economic impact from a standpoint from something, a venue such as Lost Mountain, 30-plus tournaments a year, that's a lot for hotel stays and gas and restaurants and everything else. And that not only is good for the city, but, it's good for the county too. So we have to look at that. Is that level of programming and level of service going to continue on? Because that's one of the things that's just sort of not really listed inside of the study. So that's sort of where we're at on the city of Lost Mountain. And again, I'll turn it back over to Jessica Gwynn.
Again, the City of Lost Mountain would provide community development services in that area. Something's interesting to note here is, of course, this is one of the larger cities, or would be one of the larger cities from a land area standpoint, with roughly 15% of the county's total land area included within its boundaries. What's really interesting to note here is that while it would be one of the larger cities, from a service standpoint with regard to community development, it is one of the areas that has less of a demand for services. In 2021 and also 2020, this area trends about 5% of the county's total code enforcement inspections. In fact, we have one code enforcement officer who is assigned to that area, and frequently is able to back up some of the other areas and some of the other officers because the workload is much lighter here. Also, only 3.5% of the county's commercial permits in 2020 and also 2021 were in this area. So but if you look further down, you'll see over 20,000 residential and commercial inspections. This is very much a very heavily residentially focused area. 36% of our residential permits in 2021, 40% in 2020 were in this area, and that's countywide. So you can see again, there's a significant amount of single-family residential activity that is happening here in this area. The study that is presented seems to be based on about 8 community development employees, which presumably would include planners, code enforcement officers, as well as inspections staff. We do provide planning and zoning services for this area, but again, this is an area that really has been relatively light from a zoning standpoint in the recent years. I will say, however, and something that I think is important to note with all of these is that the zoning that's in place is in place. Those legacy zonings have already occurred. Whenever there is a transition to a new city, the zoning ordinance has to come from somewhere. Often it comes from the county. They just adopt the county zoning ordinance. So I'm not sure what the proposal would be for any of these cities as to how they would provide those zoning services in that transition, but certainly we would be here to work through that. Michael?
Thank you, Jessica. Moving on to the city of Mableton. So the city of Mableton, probably the most number of parks, but sort of right there at the second with the number of acreage. A few smaller parks and a few more, neighborhood parks in the Mableton area. But you've got Mabel House Complex at 16.46, and then of course South Cobb, Discovery Park at the Riverline, Heritage, Nickajack, Thompson, Traymore, Wallace, Lyons, Bartlett, Cato, and Henderson, and then also. The Collins property and Mableton Town Square are also inside of the city of Mableton boundaries, but were not listed in the study. I believe that was just an oversight. Could be possibly on the same thing. Sweetwater Park was actually listed in the study, but is outside of the city boundaries. But so if you really look at it, it's about 534.63 acres per the study. But once you sort of take those out and add those in, it's actually about 529.30 in the study. One of the things to sort of remember here from a standpoint that one of the 3 of the first parks in Cobb County way back when were Wallace, Nickajack, and Shaw Park, and 2 of those parks are on this map. So these are two of the oldest parks in Cobb County that the Cobb County Department ran. Again, you can see the map there. Of course, you can see sort of right in the middle the Collins property. Just again, not listed. And then you sort of, see Sweetwater sort of on the left side of the page, and you can see while it's just right outside, it is right outside of the boundaries. So it's just one of those things. Again, I think it was just an oversight. Again, not going to go through every one, but just talk about a few of them. City of Mableton, Cityhood initiative. When you look at it, the amphitheater and the Arts Center at Mabel House, large venues, probably when you start thinking about it, revenue and expenditure-wise, probably, our largest facility, because it's one of those that just sort of does things all year long. Of course, you got South Cobb Complex with the recreation and the aquatic center, the brand-new park down at Discovery, Heritage Park, where you've got, just a lot of passive trails. Again, Nickajack, Thompson with the community center, Traymore with a lot of the soccer fields. Again, Wallace, again, just an active park with a lot of different amenities in it. Lyons Park, Bartlett, which is an undeveloped passive park right now, and then Cato, the same thing. And also Henderson, and these are properties that undeveloped, but we do have master planned. So there's master plans on a shelf waiting to go with them. Again, Mableton Town Square, I think it was just an oversight. Collins property, a lot of times we think that the property may not be listed inside of our GIS as Cobb County Parks property, so it just may be an oversight that way from the feasibility team, but that's just, again, something. And then Sweetwater Park's not inside the city boundaries. I think sort of the same thing from a question and assumption standpoint for the city of Mableton. You know, how will the maintenance be provided, and is it going to be a privatized model? There's a lot of specialized facilities in that area. You know, you're talking about art center and aquatics and an amphitheater. You know, how are they going to operate? Going down to the economic, you know, impact from the Mabel House Amphitheater in itself, again, is critical. But will the venue be operated very similar to the current configuration? It's actually been operated in several different ways, and I think we're at a process right now where it's actually doing very well, and just want to be looking at that. One of the study actually stated that the revenue and expenditures were actually left out of the study due to the service being on the fringe of traditional recreation services offered. So, you know, the question that we sort of have is that mean that they're still going to continue to operate it because they made no assumption, they didn't even put the revenue nor the expenditure as part of the study? So what do they sort of see with the Mabel House Amphitheater? Is that going to be something also that's sort of looked at privatizing or something like that? So that's just questions that we have on that. So that does it for Mableton. And back to Jessica again.
Okay, Mableton again is looking to provide community development services. Mableton is on the opposite end of the spectrum from Lost Mountain in that the city boundaries would incorporate about 11% of the county's total land area, but in recent years, this area has accounted for about 25% of our code enforcement inspections. So this is by far our most active area of the county for code inspections. We currently have 4 code enforcement officers who are assigned to the area, and based on the study, it looks like they anticipate about 4 code enforcement officers if it were to become a city as well. Frankly, we could use 6 or 8 code enforcement officers down in that area in order to really meet the need, and we are not able to do anything proactive. It's all been strictly reactive. So as far as improving the level of service there, 4 code enforcement officers is probably going to deliver the same level that currently is being received there. And certainly we do our best to respond quickly and in a timely fashion, but that just is one of our more active areas in the county. Interestingly, in Mableton, in 2020, that area saw a pretty steady number of permits. We saw a drop-off across the board in 2021. This has been one of our more active areas, though, for zoning activity over the last couple years. So there are a lot of redevelopment opportunities in the area that we are starting to see coming through the zoning process and plans being submitted. So I expect that we'll see an uptick in permitting and inspection activity in the area in the coming years as some of those projects come to fruition. The study seems to anticipate about 18 community development employees, of which 3 of those would be inspectors. So again, I expect that there will be the workload there will continue to grow. Again, this has been a busy area for zoning. We've had a great relationship with the Mableton Improvement Coalition there. They've been very active and, again, providing a voice to the citizens of that area and acting as a liaison, I know, working closely with the Board of Commissioners as well as the Planning Commission representatives on zonings in that area.
Thank you, Jessica. And just sort of finish it up with the city of Vinings. City of Vinings, you got Trolley Line Park and the Vinings Jubilee property. Trolley Line's about 1 acre, and the Vinings Jubilee property is about 0.38 acres. Trolley Line is a sort of a walking path, interpretive signage, some covered benches, and lighting, a lot of landscaping. Nice little park right there at Atlanta Road. Vinings Jubilee is an undeveloped passive property, so the total acreage is about 1.38 acres per study. The expenditures for the city are minimal due to the size of the properties, so there's no revenue from the current properties. The assumptions on this, I think it was pretty well spelled out for Vinings. They're looking to just privatize the maintenance of this portion, and I think they were wanting to put a little bit more into sort of a special events for the city of Vinings, and I think they spelled that out relatively good inside of their study. Just to sort of finish up on the 4 cities hoods and tie them all together, I think that interchangeably, a lot of the questions and assumptions could be used back and forth between the others. Again, part-time staff for us is critical. When we have recreation centers with one full-time programming staff, and we're trying to keep those open for 60, 70 hours a week, it's kind of difficult to do that with full-time staff. You need that part-time staff to do that. So it's things like that we just don't know because the part-time staff wasn't listed. And there's just a sort of an operational standpoint that we have to look at. So that's just sort of the tying it all together and looking at the feasibility study. So that does it for parks for all the 4 cities. And let Jessica finish it up. Sorry, should have gone through that.
Thank you. Again, City of Vinings would be another city that would provide community development services. It seems based on the study they're anticipating 3 community development employees, which would include a building inspector, and then code enforcement services would be contracted out. And as I mentioned before, we have 2 code enforcement officers who sort of share responsibility for the East Cobb area, which would also include Vinings. As you can see here, the code inspections in Vinings are very limited. We only had 52 in 2020, and that more than doubled last year to 118, but still that's less than 1 inspection a day. So again, a very light load there. Inspections, permitting, all very limited in the Vinings area, and it does only account for about 1% of the total land area, so that's to be expected. And that concludes, I believe, the staff presentations, Madam Chair. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the staff who have presented here tonight, and I'm sure there are other staff members who contributed who are not here tonight, who have taken time to delve through a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time from the time we knew we couldn't move forward with our third-party analysis to the time that this has been put together. All of you have done an outstanding job in fleshing through the data. If anyone is like me, it's a lot of overwhelming data. It gives us another opportunity to appreciate the amount of service and the level of service that's provided here in the county and put in perspective how that could be impacted with cities that are potentially formed. It is my understanding, because we don't have commissioners present here tonight, it was of the thought that we would limit discourse. For tonight, it's about 7:20, but I believe that there will be a lot of follow-up on this. I know it was planned for us to have this special called meeting. I can foresee there being additional meetings to follow, or at least correspondence to better understand this data, and meetings with the Cityhood proponents to get the questions answered that were proposed in the presentations tonight. Again, thank you to our county manager. I don't know if you have any closing remarks that you would like to share. Okay, again, our website for you to learn more about this information is cobbcounty.org/cityhood. It is a dynamic website. As much as we've put out information based on what we've received, we're willing to add and modify based on additional things that we receive, including questions. As we know, some of the questions you present other persons may have. We will build out the FAQ page to be, or a portion of the page to be responsive to your feedback. So please consider this to be a dynamic process as much as this will be a dynamic web page. With that, thank you again for all of your time tonight. Thank you, staff. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, citizens, for your interest, and hope you have a great evening. Thank you.